Are you a jet setter? Well, whether you are or you aren't, air travel is increasing year over year, and airlines want to go net zero. So is that possible, is one of the questions you could ask. And the other one is, could your airline be powered in the future by biofuel? That's a conversation well worth your 10 minutes right here on UBS Trending. Hello, everyone, and welcome to UBS Trending. I'm your host, Anthony Pastore. I'm here again with my terrific colleague, Amantia Muhadini, Sustainable and Impact Investing Strategist with the Chief Investment Office. Amantia, always good to see you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So you've got a brand new Sustainable Investing Perspectives piece out, and one of the articles in there of the three is talking about transportation, but particularly on the aviation side. It makes sense that I would ask if people are jet setters. Certainly, I know you and I are frequently in the air for business or for pleasure travel. But the question always comes up about people who are concerned about the environmental impact of planes, especially as it's expected to increase air travel over the next few decades. So what does that mean for views on energy consumption and also the general carbon footprint of travel, particularly of air travel?
Yeah, I mean, all very good questions. I will say I am one of those frequent travelers, which means I'm ramping up on points, but also I'm ramping up on my own personal carbon footprint. Now, what is that as a refresher? Really, as we think about airlines, it's hard to kind of think about them without thinking about all of the carbon emissions that are coming as a result of the burning of energy that gets us from one side of the world to the other in a few hours. Now, airlines, as you're mentioning, Anthony, in your introduction, are setting these net zero objectives. They're saying by 2050, we want to be net, not be releasing more carbon in the atmosphere as a result of our activity than we are kind of removing from the atmosphere. But how is this possible, given that all projections indicate that air travel is only likely to increase in the next 20 years? And remember, this is important because globally, CO2-related emissions from airlines are about 2% of global emissions. Mm-hmm. If we think about developed economies like the US, for example, it's 11% of the transport-related emissions. So it really does matter. I think about it as that frequent traveler that we're mentioning.
Yeah, certainly I think about it as well. I get inside the plane and you can smell that jet fuel kind of burning off as you're arriving down the gangplank or the airway to get into the plane, and you feel it, it's happening, and you think to yourself, well, that's the way it is, unfortunately. It seems like electric planes might not be sort of a reality, especially for large planes like a Boeing or an Airbus plane. But is decarbonizing air travel even possible, especially now?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question, and we have to be realistic here. So as we think about the future of mobility in general, electrification is coming in lots of other parts of transport. We're seeing electric helicopters, kind of short distance type things being piloted. For airlines, it does seem like it's a little perhaps a bridge too far to mix my modes of travel there. What we are seeing, however, is as international airlines are committing to these objectives, they're starting to think about how do we get there. And a big piece of the how, as we look 3 decades out, is in replacing that jet fuel. So you may have noticed in your travels that some of kind of the papers and the plastic and all of those things that you experience as a consumer, some of those are starting to go away. I've definitely noticed, even in economy, those could be cost savings for airlines. That's not, however, the biggest impact. The biggest impact you and I will not perceive. What the International Airline Association estimates is that in the next 3 decades, about 65% of the carbon emission reductions will come from replacing the jet fuel with sustainable aviation fuel. So that's a completely different way of powering our airplanes that should get us there in 3 or 4 decades.
So do you think that emissions then is actually the biggest hurdle here? For that net zero, kind of reducing the carbon footprint?
That's right. Emissions that are a result of the fuel that is being used. I'll say there's a couple other parts here. More efficient fleets, so more efficient planes that need less energy to operate are going to be part of the solution. That's where the technological innovation opportunity will come. But that's costlier, that will come over time. What's interesting about changing the fuel is that it's a drop-in solution, meaning you can have the same set of fleets and then just change the fuel to something more sustainable with 50% or even less carbon footprint. And so that starts getting us to that goal.
So it's more cost efficient for the airline then to use some of these sustainable aviation fuels or these SAFs in their existing plane engines, in other words.
So yes, it is, but the answer is yes and no. Now these sustainable fuels are made by things like corn, fats, oil, agricultural products, right? So another word for them is biofuels. Now, it's easier to drop them in. However, there's a supply and demand mismatch at the moment. Estimates indicate that only about 0.1 to 0.5 of total used jet fuel in the US and Europe right now is this sustainable kind. So that's a drop in the bucket. And while the US government is committing to increasing supply in the next decade and then by 2050, we're still looking at a big ramp up period that really needs to accelerate before this can be cost effective for airlines.
Yeah, it seems like one of the goals should be, if especially as more and more humans are populating the planet, we're 8 billion plus now, that we need to feed people first. And obviously the grains, the corns, and all those raw agricultural materials are used to make so many different kinds of foods. So then to think about using it for fuel for airlines, it just seems like we have a priority of feeding people first, especially when there's droughts and shortages and things. So it makes it very complicated.
It does, although I would challenge anyone who has this binary thinking there to rethink these things, right? Everything is interconnected. And as we think about portfolio construction and different parts of a portfolio coming together, when we talk about these themes, they're not standalone, really. So we're also talking about innovation in agriculture that is happening in parallel. So let's just not pigeonhole ourselves in one problem, forget about the innovation in other areas and how everything puts together.
Yeah, which is a very valid point. I'm glad you pointed that out, because we have spoken on various programs about these innovations we're seeing in vertical farming and farming that takes a lot less water, et cetera. So that being said, then just real quickly, it seems like a lot of what we're talking about today might be a little farther down the road. Is there any opportunity for investors right now in this particular space of aviation fuel, and especially that is going to the net zero world that we're talking about?
Sure. I mean, look, innovation is definitely happening in this area. I would say the major players that are producing sustainable aviation fuel are not deriving a majority of their revenues from it yet. So we would not think of this as a pure play investment idea. What we would say is for investors who are interested in this to just open up their lens essentially and look at opportunities in the smart mobility space, as well as clean air and carbon reduction and energy efficiency, because all of those things come together and these themes capture those opportunities in a more diversified manner. So hopefully we'll all get there to the bigger picture
right.
together.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but even though it may not be happening in earnest right now in aviation, that's happening in other areas of our economies. And we look at where automobiles are going and other machines that we use in our homes that are more efficient, energy efficient. They need all of these materials, and what you're talking about here for investors, not just for the aviation side. So there are opportunities.
That's exactly right. We just have to look at the whole gamut here.
See, I've learned a lot by talking to you over the years, Amatya. Thank you very much. Good to see you as always.
Great to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
And this is an excerpt out of the latest Sustainable Investing Perspectives publication that Amatya and the team write every month. So you can take a look for that at ubs.com/views, which is our insights page. And you can also check out all of our content on social media, particularly on Instagram. At UBS Trending is our account there for content that you won't find anywhere else. So please check that out. You can also look at us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, or X as it's now called. And as always, if you have any questions about your portfolio, make sure to speak with a financial advisor. Until next time, I'm Anthony Pastore. Have a great day. And if you are traveling, travel safely. See you soon. Keep your eyes on what's trending, everybody. Thanks.